All right. Well, like we all know, while we're here for this conference, catfish are important to the recreational fisheries throughout the United States. In the most recent U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey, catfish drew 8.1 million anglers for a total of 74 million angler days. If you take a look at just in the state of Kansas, our latest licensed angler survey, channel catfish were the most preferred fish to catch, their favorite fish to catch. And it was actually that was the third most favorite fish, and it was the most sought after fish, targeted species. Estimated harvest in Kansas, approximately 900,000 fish, with an additional 700,000 being released. Our hatcheries in Kansas, we have 4 that all of them will contribute to the channel catfish production. We also have an off-site rearing pond that is focused completely on intermediate catfish. Kansas utilizes what's referred to as the Kansas strain. This is one of the oldest domesticated stocks of channel catfish used. It dates back to 1925. Our culture section annually produces approximately 360,000 intermediates, and those fish are going to be in that 8 to 13 inch range. The urban program, we purchase an additional 170,000 fish annually. Those fish are actually in that 15 to 17 inch range. They're going to average about a pound, and they're primarily utilized in our urban waters. We also have several waters out in western Kansas that go through drought cycles. And when those ponds fill up, we like to get catchable fish into those ponds as quickly as we can. Hybrid catfish, for those of you that are not familiar with it, we take a female channel catfish and a male blue catfish. For the rest of the talk, I'm just going to refer to them as hybrids. They started being utilized in the 1960s, primarily in commercial food fish producers. And then they have been utilized some in pay-for-play recreational fishing ponds. Those ponds are more hatchery-like. They usually have a associated feeding program with them to keep growth rates as high as possible. This hybrid requires artificial spawning. There's no way that this happens in the wild. It's a very safe hybrid to play around with. The testes out of the male blue cat have to be removed, put in a blender, and then that slurry is what's used to fertilize the channel catfish eggs. Okay, like all hybrids, we always see the good side of things when they start talking about them. They're faster growth, better feed conversion, tolerance of lower oxygen, increased resistance to disease, tolerance to crowded growth conditions in ponds, uniformity. So that most of these attributes are focused in a culture situation. But there are a couple of them that kind of stick out when we're looking at management. Faster growth, we're interested in that, of course, and then maybe a better yield product when you look at the overall fillet size. And then I was excited about this project primarily because of the possibility of increased vulnerability to angling. That's something that very desirable, especially I have the Wichita district under my purview, and that's something I like to see. I mean, every fish that we stock in the urban environment that doesn't get harvested is money lost. For this study, we had 2 of our state fishing lakes. Our state fishing lakes are department owned and managed. They're not utilized for anything other than sport fish recreation. There's no irrigation that comes out of them or animal use. But tried to keep the study sites as similar as possible. Both of these are located in southeast Kansas. They have similar fish assemblages. Wilson State Lake is a little bit bigger at 106 surface acres. It has a mean depth of approximately 14 foot, a little less productive than Montgomery, and it has a stocking rate of 25 fish per acre annually. Montgomery's 87 acres, again, pretty similar fish structure or fish assemblage. Channel catfish are stocked annually at 40 per acre. Both of these impoundments are covered by the same regulations, 15-inch minimum length and 5-a-day creel. So for the stocking schedule, we essentially took what our annual stockings had been with channel catfish and cut them in half, where we were going to do half channel, half hybrid. Hybrid catfish are stocked at age 0. These fish are going to be 6 to 9 inches. We acquired those, I believe the first year we got them from Mississippi, and the last 2 years it was for the vendors in Alabama. We were really kind of dependent on availability when those vendors can provide the fish, and that's why you see we stocked them a couple months later than what we stocked the channel catfish that are produced in our own hatchery system. The channel catfish in our hatchery systems, to get to an intermediate size, those fish are spawned in July, then they're held over that winter, and they're actually stocked at age 1. So they have an extra growing investment into them. To identify our stockings from 2013 through 2015, all fish were adipose fin clipped, and then hybrids were branded on the right side, channel catfish on the left side, and each year we had a different brand orientation style so we can identify fish that we would catch or anglers would catch to year class and species. We hit the sampling pretty hard. March gill nets and October gill nets. Those gill nets are the same gill nets we use in our standardized fall sampling. They're an experimental design, 80 foot long with 10 different panels, 3/4 inch to 2.5 inch bar mesh and with the 1/4 inch increments. We also use supplemental gear like our baited tandem hoop nets, which we have pretty good success in sampling our channel catfish and smaller impoundments. And then we tried the low pulse electrofishing that we use for our standardized blue cat sampling. Catfish sampling was pretty variable among species, among lake, gear, and impoundment. Low pulse electrofishing showed not to be effective in sampling either species, and that use was discontinued after the 2014 sampling season. Gill net catch was usually lower than 10 fish per net, with baited tandem hoop nets usually greater than 10 fish per net. No real significant differences other than the 2 blips there. We had October gill nets in 2014 at Wilson. There were more hybrids sampled. And in 2016, the baited hoop nets produced more channel catfish in Montgomery State Fish and Lake. But by and large, they sampled the same. We also had an angler creel that ran in 2015 and 2016. This was a Radom creel design, not random, because Radom's a lot better than random. These are the jokes, folks. They're not going to get any better. Our standardized creel, we basically have used the same small impoundment creel design since the 90s. Conducted March through October, daylight hours only. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I think that kind of had a little bit of an impact on what we saw. We focus more effort for our creels during the months of April, May, and June. That's typically what we see as our higher use periods. It's a typical angler creel. You know, I mean, you're going to meet the angler, you're going to ask them how many are in your party, how long have you been fishing, where you're from, et cetera, et cetera. Anglers that did have catfish in possession, those fish were identified and measured. Only fish that can be discerned by species. If they lost the brand, they weren't counted. Only ones that we could positively identify were used in the calculations for the creel. And then the 2016 survey, we also included some questions that specifically asked the angler their opinions on some of the hybrid catfish stuff that we were doing. Typical in every time you try to do a study, things go sideways on you. You think you have it nailed down, and for whatever reason, both years resulted in lower participation than previous creels. Catches were lower than expected, and even though there have been, there's some differences, they were not statistically different. So overall, there's no evidence that hybrids are easier or harder to catch than channel catfish. Now, of course, this brings up questions to us. Are our low numbers and samples evidence of harvest vulnerability? Do we have a lot more nocturnal harvest going on? Do we have illegal activities going on? Are we losing these fish through downstream flushing? And so we have some questions on some of this. And then, as you'd expect, I mean, overall, you throw something new and shiny at anglers, they're fairly supportive of it, especially if they don't perceive any negative impact to it. Okay, faster growth. We calculated, I'll see if I can muddle through this one. We calculated at predicted days to get to the 15-inch minimum length limit, and then we used the June 1st as a standardized birthday, and then we would take date that the fish was caught, and then subtract day hatch. So we would come up with this here, and this is statistically significant. Hybrid catfish are meeting 15-inch minimum length limit a year ahead of channel catfish. Montgomery, it wasn't quite a year. It was actually like 250 days, and Wilson was about a year. More of a standard growth curve over time, and it's the same basic data. Hybrids are reaching 15 inches even though they start out smaller. They're beating channel catfish to that 15-inch minimum length limit. We don't see many bigger fish though. They kind of drop out of the population around 21 inches. And again, we start questioning, are we looking at differences in flushing? Are there something else going on? We used a quantile regression analysis to see if there's any differences in predicted weights. This is just another way of looking at body condition. We probably could have used WR equation for channel catfish and seen a similar result. But the take-home message is by the time those hybrids start getting above the length limit, you're starting to see that the body morphology differences in the hybrids versus the channel cat, they're going to yield a bigger fillet. You have the potential. And this is something that's been, it's supported in the literature that the aquaculturists have supplied. That was one of the big benefits of the fish as far as a food fish goes. So that didn't necessarily surprise us. More rapid weight gain in the hybrids again, and we still have questions about larger size fish. We have a pretty small sample size there. So wrap it all up in conclusion. Both of the catfish retained freeze brands very well through the timeline of this study. 3 years seemed to be about it, though. They started to get a little bit harder to discern, and it depended really on the brand orientation. As a side note, hybrids reached legal length approximately a year quicker than channel catfish in these two systems. Hybrids grew more rapid than channel catfish, especially at larger sizes. There's no evidence in difference of catchability. The one real benefit for us may be the fact that we can stock them a year at age 0 and not having to overwinter those fish. That can free up some ponds in our hatchery system and allow us to do other things in the spring, like grow out more advanced fingerlings, predaceous fingerlings, walleye, when we do our wiper work. So, I mean, it comes down to hatchery space, and a lot of times that's a very big issue that we have. I didn't include cost analysis. Our intermediate production channel catfish typically run around $1.15. The hybrids that get them up to Kansas and delivered, it was like $1 to $1.25. So really not much of a difference, but at the same time, if hatchery space is limited, this can be a way to kind of ease some of that pain. Long-term growth still remains unknown. Still putting, I'm still interested in seeing where this may go in the future. I think we need to kind of get a better handle on if we are seeing a differential rate in flushing between the two species. And also, is there a survivability issue, or are we seeing some other problems? I think we have a couple of areas I'd like to try to stock some hybrids that we can remove flushing from the equation. We have a large wildlife area with mined land area with mining strip pits. So it could be something we could stock and then evaluate in the future. But that's all I had. Like to thank all the fisheries folks that helped us out, especially the branding crew. When you send out an email asking for support, we adipose fin clipped and branded over 19,000 fish in 3 years, and we couldn't have done it without everybody chipping in. And that was fish management biologists, college students, and we had hatchery personnel helping us. So it was a big team play. And funding was provided by our department and Sport Fish Restoration. And with that, I can take any question.
Thanks, John.